Back to our C Sharp Absolute Beginner series. In the previous lesson, I think we looked at the for each loop, so which brought us to the end of the loops, because we've looked at while loop, we've looked at for loop, and then finally we looked at the for each loop. That was after looking at arrays. So in today's lesson, we're going to look at methods. So let me just bring up Notepad. That's methods like this, methods, methods. What are methods? Methods are like what we call subroutines. So imagine where you have like some lines of code. So let's say this is statement 1, statement 2, and statement 3. We're assuming all these are valid program C# lines of code. So statement 1 like is a valid command that you give the computer. Statement 2 is another valid command. Statement 3 is another valid. You can have other commands. So let's say these 3 lines of code, right? There are 3 lines of code that you usually execute in order to achieve a particular goal, or to solve a particular problem. Okay, now you will realize later in your programming career that in most cases, or in some cases, you will find that there are certain sections or blocks or lines of code that you will find yourself repeating over and over again. So what I mean by that is, suppose this is your program. Let's say you've written a program which contains these lines of code: statement 1, statement 2, statement 3, and then you have some lines of code. Let's say these are all lines of code, and then somewhere down the line in your program you will find that you want to execute these 3 statements again. Okay, now of course there is the jumping statement, the go-to statement, but you would later realize that the go-to statement, go-to statement is written like this: GOTO, go-to. You later realize in your programming career that the go-to statement is evil. Okay, it's just stay away from it. It's not it makes your code what we call, it gives you spaghetti code, meaning your code tends to intertwine, and it makes it very difficult for you to debug your code. Now the answer to solving a problem like this is, like, the problem now is, suppose you have these 3 lines of code, and then you've written some commands. Then you want to execute these 3 lines of code again. Now normally you would think, okay, why not just write the 3 statements again, right? Of course you can write the 3 statements again in your code. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that, it will work. But imagine if this is not just 3 lines of code. Suppose it's 100 lines of code. That means you have to copy that 100 lines of code, paste it down there, right? And then suppose somewhere along the line in your code again, you need to execute, that's after some other arbitrary lines of code, you need to execute these 3 lines of code again. It means you have to go back, copy that line of code, paste it down there. Remember, we're assuming these are 100 lines of code. What does that do to your program? Do you see how your program begins to bloat in size? Which it's not that it's going to make your program run. Your program will still run. However, your program increases in size, meaning uh, it will take a much higher size than needed, higher size of memory than actually needed. Okay, so how you reduce the size of your program, or how do you call it, factorize your program in such a way that it becomes much more efficient, is by the use of methods. Okay, so usually what you do is you will create a method, and you put these 3 lines of code inside that method, and well, you declare the method, and you declare the method as having these 3 lines of code, and then everywhere you need to execute those 3 lines of code, or those 100 lines of code, as we've said initially, you just call that method. Okay, just remember your variable. If you need to store, the difference between a method and a variable is the variable stores data, intrinsic data, right? Like float, bool. However, the method stores lines of code. Okay, it stores like commands. Okay, those commands are called upon to execute whenever you call that method. Okay, so this is just a brief introduction I'm trying to give you on methods. So right now, I think it's about time we jump into Visual Studio and try out and see how methods are executed. I think to do that, I will try with a sample program. Okay, we just write a very simple program. Let's open the previous program we've written in the previous lesson. Okay, Visual Studio is still loading. Okay, finally. Okay, I'll go ahead and just remove everything in here. Okay, great. So now we have a fresh program for us to write. Okay, now imagine, remember what I said. Imagine I'm going to start by writing just a normal program without using method. Okay, and then after that we're going to use a method, and we'll see how useful or how efficient the method does. The method makes our program. It kinds of squeezes down the number of lines of code we need to write in a program. Okay, let's start with the normal. Okay, suppose you want to write a program that collects the names of your user, his mother name, his father name, and probably his brother name and his sister name. Okay, now suppose in collecting of the names for each, like for his name, you want his first name, his middle name if any, and his last name. Okay, the same thing with his father name. You want to collect his first name, his middle name, and his last name. Same thing with the mother name. That's for every name you want to collect. You need to collect those 3 items: the first name, the middle name, and the last name. Okay. So first of all, let's create a variable to store his name, his first name, his middle name, and his last name. So let's call that, remember the best type of data type to store a name is string, because it holds characters. Okay, so string, we're going to create a variable string, and we're going to call it user first name. Okay, I'm going to try and make this program as simple as possible. User first name. Okay, and then we're going to create another variable string user middle name. Okay, and then string user last name. Okay, I'll just detour a little bit and jump into what we call camel case convention. It's a naming convention in programming whereby you start with a small letter, right? You continue with small letters. However, after every single word, okay, the next that's the first letter of the next word is going to start with a capital letter, and then every other letter turns back to small letters, and then the letter that starts the next word starts with another capital letter. Okay, it's called camel case. So camel case, like this. It's called camel case naming convention. It's usually good right from the start of your programming career. You select naming conventions that are like they're renowned to every or most programmers. Okay, so if you come from a Java background, I'm pretty sure you will have that. If you were taught Java in say not high school, maybe in secondary, okay, maybe not secondary school, in the university, maybe 100 level and above, most likely, I'm sure you're going to be introduced to the camel case convention of naming of naming, not necessarily variables. For C sharp, it's a little bit different in that they usually use capital letters even for the first letter. I think that's what they do with methods. Okay, I'm not sure, but yeah, I think they do that with methods. I don't think they do that with variables, but they do the same with properties. So if this was a property, it will start with a capital U. Okay. Anyway, I use a small letter. I use the camel case convention for naming all my variables. So you'll always see me starting with a small letter, and then after every word, the next letter begins with a capital letter. Okay. All right. Enough about that. Let's go to okay. So these are the three variables that are going to hold the user's first name, his middle name, and his last name. Okay. Um, okay. Maybe let's collect the name of the user first before we continue, or we could create all the variables first. Okay, let's declare all the variables first. Okay, so let's declare the father name. Okay, so call it father first name. So these variables will store the names of the father. String father last name, string sorry, that should have been middle name. Okay, doesn't matter. Father middle name. Okay, so these are the variables that will store the father's names inside these variables. Okay, remember what variables are. They're just stores or little boxes where you can put items and then retrieve them later. Okay, so and then we're going to create for the mother, we're going to create string mother first name, string mother last middle name, and finally string mother last name. Okay, these are all. I think we should stop there. I think you get the point. We don't need to add more variables. You get the point of what I'm trying to explain with just three items. That's the user's names, the user's father names, and then the user's mother's names. Okay. Okay. So in the program we're going to write, we said we were going to collect these um, items from the user. So we're going to say, first of all, we're going to use console.writeLine. Okay, console.writeLine. So we're going to use this to notify the user that we want him to write or to provide us his first name. Okay, so console.writeLine, uh, enter your names. So this is what will be displayed to the user, and then in the next line we're going to try and collect the user's first name, middle name, and last name. Okay, so we're going to do something like we're going to say user first name equals console dot readline, and that's, remember what this does. It allows you to collect information. So it allows the user to type something, and then whatever the user types is going to be stored inside this user first name variable. Okay. um okay then next, okay, maybe we should let the user know he should enter first name first. So we're going to, before we allow the user to write, we're going to say console.writeLine first name. Okay, this signifies we want the user to enter his first name. Okay, I'll just copy this and paste, and then make the changes I want to make. Do that. This will be console.writeLine middle name, and then we're going to say user middle name equals console.readline, and then we're going to say console.writeLine last name. Okay, and then we're going to say user last name equals console.readline. Okay. Okay, I think this will prove the point I'm trying to make. Okay, this is where if you notice, what we're trying to do here is we want the user to provide his first name, his middle name, and then his last name. Okay, now what if we want the user to provide us with the names of his father? Does anyone notice what happens? Okay, first of all, we're gonna have to write out this, that's displayed to the console. We're going to say enter your father's names, and then and what happens, you realize we're going to copy everything here and then paste it here. Okay, I can see a little problem. This doesn't really solve the problem. Okay, the reason is because of this user first name. You realize now we're going to have to change this to I didn't want this. We'll have to change this to father first name. Anyway, I'll try and see if I can explain this. Father first name, right? Okay, and then this will have to change to father middle name, Okay, I really didn't want us to have to change anything. I wanted a situation where we could just copy the code here and then just paste it here, and then I show you how you can. Uh, okay, this is not going to be a very good example. Not going to be a very good example. Okay, so what do we do? What do we do? Father last name. Okay, let's just go ahead. I think I've used a method that takes an argument. I really didn't want you to have to use a method that takes an argument. Anyway, we might have to be forced to use that. Okay. So, and then if we want to collect the user's mother name, so we'll have to first write this, enter your mother's names, and then we'll have to copy this again and paste it down here. And okay, we'll need to change obviously these to mother first name, mother middle name, and mother last name, right? Okay. So this is what I meant in my introduction to methods. If you look at this code, look at what's happening. We wanted to collect the user's names. Okay, we want his first name, we want his middle name, and we want his last name. Okay, and to do that, we had to write these 6 lines of code. Okay, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, these 6 lines of code, we had to write them. And then notice when we wanted to collect the user's father names, okay, father's names, we had to write these 6 very similar 6 lines of code. The only difference between these 6 lines of code and these 6 lines of code is this variable here. We changed this variable to this, and then we changed this variable to this, and then we changed this variable to this. Now this is a bad. I really didn't want us to change. I wanted an example where would have exactly the code here to be duplicated here. Okay, I really wanted that because let's see if I can if we can make this work. Let's see how do we do that. Okay, suppose we want we just want to collect using one variable. Okay, let's use string name. Okay, string first name. We're going to declare a variable and call it first name equals this, and then I see, because of the declaration. So okay, let's take out this declaration. Okay, remove it from here, and let's put it on here. Okay, we're going to call it first name, so we don't need this string here. We've already declared it here. And then we're going to declare middle name. Okay, and then we're going to declare a last name. Okay, so these 3 variables, they're just like auxiliary variables. They're going to help us in getting the names from the console. Okay, whenever we collect a first name from the console, we just store it here temporarily before we move it to wherever we want it to be. So now by doing this, it means we can use first name here, middle name here, and last name here, and last name here. Okay, That also means we can exactly copy exactly. Aha. So I've gotten what I wanted initially. So it means the code here is exactly the same as the code here. Okay. And then finally, we copy this again. That's for the mother. We're going to paste exactly the same code. Aha! So this is what I want. Okay, this is a good example. So if you look at this program, the code I've written here is exactly the code I've written here, and it's also exactly the code I've written here. Okay, so in this case, at this point, the first name, the middle name, the last name are going to we're using it to collect the user's first name. Okay, and then as at this point, we're using first name, middle name, and last name to collect the user's father names. Okay, and then at this point, we're using first name, middle name, and last name to collect the user's mother names. Okay. Okay. Now, if you look at this code, there's so much repetition. Okay. Whenever you see a program where you're repeating the same lines of code over and over again, that should give you a hint that you need a method. Okay. Now, the reason why you would need this method, because it's really going to imagine if this operation that's collecting the users names needs you to write like 100 lines of code, for example, meaning this is 100 lines of code. It means when you want to collect the father's names, you're going to write another 100 lines of code. Okay, we're just making an assumption, because you find out in program there are some problems. When you want to solve some problems, it can take you 1,000 lines of code. Okay, so 100 lines of code isn't that small. It's actually practical. Okay, so it means you're writing 100 lines of code, another 100 lines of code, another 100 lines of code, making it 300 lines of code in what you could have achieved in probably 103 lines of code. And I'll show you how you would do that in 103 lines of code. Okay, so in this example where we write this, we are only using we didn't use a method. Okay, however, if you would use a method, you can drastically reduce the number of lines of code in this program. And this is how you do that. Okay, first you create a method that contains these lines of code. Okay, so I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to create a method down here. Notice where I'm creating the method. I'm still within my static void main declaration. Okay, it doesn't matter where you create the method. You can create the method. Okay, I see a problem. You're not going to sorry about that. You're not going to create the method within your static void main. Okay, instead you're going to create the method just outside the static void, the main method. Okay, this is actually a method on its own. Okay, so you're going to create the method still within the program class. Notice this is the beginning of the program class. However, it's going to be outside the main method. So this is the beginning of the main method, and the main method is inside the program class, and this is the end of the main method, and this is the end of the program class. So it has to be in between this closing bracket and this closing bracket. Okay, so we're going to create the method here, and this is how we're going to create the method. First, you need to let the computer know if the method is public or it's private. Now, if you do not write anything, it means by default the method is private. Okay, So because we want the method to be public, we have to indicate it's a public method. Okay, sorry, I think if you want the method to be public, you don't need to indicate it. You don't need to indicate it. Just write the method. Okay, you just declare the method. However, if you want it to be private, you have to indicate that the method is private. Okay. I'll show you the use of this private and public access modifiers maybe later when we look at class. That's this class. Okay. So for now, don't worry too much about the public and the private keyword. So because it's a public method, we're not going to write anything, just like for the main method. If this was a private method, private needs to be written before the static. Okay. So it's just a public method, so we won't write anything. The next thing is the return data type of that method. Okay. For now, we're going to make it a void return data type, meaning the method does not return any value. Okay, I will explain what that means later. So we're going to call it a void method, and then finally we've got to give the method a name. So we're going to call it get full names, because that's what we're trying to do with this method. We want to get full names. Now this is in the declaration of a method. After the name of the method, you need to end it with brackets. Okay, you open a normal bracket and then you close a normal bracket. Okay, after that you're going to create you're going to open a normal a curly bracket. That's this type of bracket, and then close the curly bracket. In between those two curly brackets, the open and the close, is where you would write the body of the method. Okay, that's you're going to write all the lines of code that are contained within this method. So I'm going to write the code that I've just copied from up there. I'm going to paste it here. So it's the console.writeLine, first name equals this, console.writeLine, middle name is called equals this, and that. Okay, I can see another problem we didn't consider when we were writing this, and that's the scope of this first name variable. Okay, I think the best thing we can do in this case is we can strip out those three variables for now. I'm going to take their declaration out of there and I'm going to make them public here. So I'm going to put in okay, it doesn't really need to be public. We can make them private, but we'll just leave them public. Remember, if you don't provide anything, it means the variables are public. Okay, so there's a reason why I moved out those okay, that's a big problem. Okay, so I've been giving you wrong information. I think if you want it to be public, you have to provide the public keyword. Okay, that's not the problem because first name is still underlined. What could the problem be? Represents the standard input. An object reference is required for the non-static field. Oh, okay. So that's not the problem. The problem is because I have not provided this keyword. Is that the problem? That's not the problem. That's not the problem. Keyword this is not valid in yeah, the main method is a static method, so it cannot access dynamic variables or instance variables. Okay, I'm still trying to make this work. I just want to give you a good example. Let's take that those definitions, those declarations out of there, and let's bring them back here. And okay, how do we get first name, middle name, last name to be populated from here? Okay, I think what we should do is we should probably make these static. Let's make them static. Okay, so we're going to make this to be a static variable. We're going to make this to be a static variable, and we're going to make this to be a static variable. For now, I don't want you to worry too much about the static keyword and why these first name, middle name, and last name cannot be used if I declare these as normal instance variables, but can actually be used if I declare them as static variables. Don't worry too much. We're going to explain when we start treating classes. Okay, for now, just imagine these are variables that are global, whereby they're accessible in here. Okay, these variables are accessible in here, and they are also accessible in here. Okay, so you can see our first name, middle name, and last name. I can now use them within our method, our get full names method. Okay, because I just made them static. Okay, don't worry too much about that. Okay, the main thing I want you to take from here is that I've taken these lines of code, these 6 lines of code, and I've placed them inside this get full names method. Okay, now by doing this, every time I do something like this, get full names, okay, and then I put the normal brackets, and then I put a semicolon. Okay, why am I getting errors? An object reference is required for the non-static. Okay, it's because I haven't made this static, so I'm going to make this a static method also. Sorry about that. So I'll have to make this a static method. Okay, all right. So now I can write get full names as a method. Okay, now notice what I've done. I've eliminated the need to write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, wherever I need to write these 6 lines of code, I can just substitute by writing this and end it with a semicolon, which means I can also do the same for this. I can change this to sorry, not that. I can change this to get full names, put my brackets, open bracket, close bracket, and a semicolon. Okay, I can also do the same for this and change it to get full names, open my bracket, close my bracket. Okay, so that is what this method does for you. Now look at how we have trimmed down the number, the lines of code. Notice how many lines of code we have now. We have 53. Initially we had like 6 lines here, 6 lines here, 6 lines here, and we didn't have any line here. Okay, anyway, 6 by 3 gives you 18. Also remember, this could have been 100 lines. Okay, if this was 100 lines, that would make this 100 here, 100 here, 100 here, making 300. Okay, however, with the implementation of the method, all you have is you'll have 100 maybe plus 1 for the declaration here, so you'll have 100 here, 101, and then 102, 103, 104. Okay, and then in every spot where you need to write these 6 lines of code in every area in your program where you need to write those 100 lines of code, you can just substitute them for this single line of code. Okay, now that is what a method is. Forget about the static. Just what I want you to hold is just the void and the get full names and the name of the method. So the void is saying this method does not return anything, meaning if you call this method, it's just going to execute these lines of code and that's it. Okay, it goes to the next line, meaning it will now execute here. Okay, so if we run this program, what happens is it will execute this. If it encounters this, it will come to the declaration of this get full names method. Okay, meaning it will come here. It will now execute these 6 lines of code. When it's going to exit, it's going to exit from where this ends. Okay, meaning the next thing after exiting the method, the next thing it will execute is this. Okay, and then next it sees the get full names method, which causes it to come down here again, execute these 6 lines of code, exits, and comes out to down to here as the next line. Okay, encounters it again, goes back, execute these 6 lines of code, exit, and then comes out here, and then finally terminates the program. Okay, let's just run that program and see what happens. Okay. Okay, so it says enter your names, and then it allows me to enter my first name. Okay, so I can write my first name, push enter. You see, it allows me to enter my, remember, it's only by calling these get full names that it allows me, it allows the computer to execute all these 6 lines of code. So it has executed this. Now it executed console.writeLine middle name, so it's asking me for my middle name, and then after I provide my middle name, it's going to jump to the next line and ask me to enter my last name. Okay, let's just go ahead. Since my middle name, I don't have a middle name, I'll just press enter, and then it asks me for my last name, and I can provide my last name. And so you see, after that's after executing this for the first get full name that it encountered, it now executed this as the next line. Okay, that's why you're seeing this enter your father's names. Okay, and then it's now asking me for the first name. That's the first name of my father, obviously. And I can provide, okay, I'm not going to provide my real father's name, but let's say I just put some name. Okay, and then it's now asking me for the middle name. Okay, I can provide anything, and then the last name, and then the mother's names. Okay, so I enter, and then finally the program ends because there's no longer any there's no more lines of code to execute. So this is what a method is. Okay, and if you look at the function of a method, it gives you like a very nice and clean way to write your code, in that it takes away all the implementation or all the rough work to a corner, or like it sidelines it gives you a fresh space where you can write all the gibberish, all the workings of how you solve a particular problem, and then you give that solution a single name. Okay, so whenever you want to solve that problem, you just call the name of that solution. That's get full name, that's the name of the method. You just call the name of the method goes on and execute all those lines of code that you provided. Okay, and then any other place in your code where you need to do exactly the same, or you need to solve exactly the same problem again, you can just call the method again. You don't need to write the lines of code one by one for all the workings. Imagine if this is 6 lines, this is 6 lines, this is 6 lines. It's just bloating our code, okay, for no reason. There's no reason why you should be repeating code like that when you can actually create a method that holds those lines of code, and then whenever you want to execute those lines of code, you just call the name of the method. Okay, now this is just one type of method we have seen in this class. I think this class has gone far too long. I'm going to end the class here. I'm going to end the lecture here. I should stop saying class because of this, so I don't confuse people in thinking what class is he talking about. So I'll be using lesson for this, okay? So I think it's probably smart to end the lesson here. This is a non-return type method, meaning the method does not return anything. That's why it's given a type of void. And then also the method does not take any arguments. Okay, let me bring up Notepad to show, just to type arguments for you so you see what it looks like. So arguments, okay, the method does not contain any arguments. If the method contained arguments, this is where we would have provided the arguments inside this bracket. By the way, let's look at this main method. If you look at inside the main method, you have a declaration of an array. Remember, this is an array. So you have a declaration of an array, and the name of the array was args, args, okay, and it's a string array. So that is how you create arguments. Anyway, in this for this main method, there's only one argument, which is the args. However, the args argument is actually a string array. Remember what an array is. An array can have more than one item stored inside, okay? So it means this args argument provided to this main method can actually have a lot of other sub arguments inside it, okay? That's how you provide arguments inside to a method. Anyway, we're going to look at methods that have arguments later in later lessons, and we're also going to look at methods that return a value. Okay, so in this, what we looked at is how you can create a method, a void method, meaning a method that does not return a value and also does not take any arguments. Okay, so that's the end of this lesson.